So then he goes on to say, therefore what is necessary above all is this, that beforehand we ponder the essence of being as that which is worthy of thinking, that beforehand in thinking this we experience to what extent we are called upon first to trace a path for such experiencing and to prepare that path as a way into that which till now has been impassable. This is what he's doing in his philosophy, opening up paths that have been obscured and concealed. All this we can do only if, before considering the question that is seemingly always the most immediate one and the only urgent one, what shall we do, we ponder this, how must we think? So in order to do anything about this, we have to first get our thinking straight about being. We have to know what we're talking about. For thinking is genuine activity, genuine taking a hand. If to take a hand means to lend a hand to the essence, the coming to presence of being. This means to prepare or build for the coming to presence of being, that abode in the midst of whatever is, into which being brings itself and its essence to utterance in language. Language is the key thing for Heidegger about the human being. If we didn't have language, we would not be, as humans, the being that can, presence being, that can make it manifest. Language builds a house for being through poetry, through novels and literature and the arts, and through speaking and discoursing and utterance. That is what makes the will of being known. Language first gives to every purposeful deliberation its ways and its byways. Without language, there would be lacking to every doing, every dimension in which it could bestir itself and be effective. In view of this, language is never primarily the expression of thinking, feeling, and willing. Language is the primal dimension within which man's essence is first able to correspond at all to being and its claim, and in corresponding to belong to being. This primal corresponding, expressly carried out, is thinking. Through thinking, we first learn to dwell in the realm in which there comes to pass the restorative surmounting of the destiny of being, the surmounting of enframing, which is what the turning is. We're surmounting, going beyond this epoch of enframing, but we can only do that through thinking, and it's through thinking. Thinking is the privileged mode of the human being that we can get beyond this and find out what it is that being wants. So the coming to presence of enframing is the danger, as we have seen. As the danger, being turns about into the oblivion of its coming to presence, turns away from this coming to presence, and in that way simultaneously turns counter to the truth of its coming to presence. So that means then that we're to imagine that with the oblivion of being, you can almost imagine, and all through this he's got this idea of something turning around and around and around like a spiral. It's a kind of a historical spiral. What has happened in enframing then is that being has turned its face away from us, so that what we are now confronted with is enframing. And enframing has concealed being. Being is on the other side, and it's fallen into oblivion. And by oblivion here, you should think of, remember that his theory of truth is that the unconcealed is aletheia. But the word aletheia contains the word lethe within it, and lethe was the river of forgetfulness in Greek thought, Greek mythology rather. If you drank from that river, you would forget everything. So it's oblivion. So the oblivion of being is the forgetfulness of being, and it's lethe in the sense of the opposite of aletheia as the coming to presence, the unconcealedness of things, of beings and entities. So in the oblivion of being has turned being away so that it cannot come to presence in its authentic mode. Instead, now it's coming to presence through its deficient mode as enframing. In the danger, there holds sway this turning about not yet thought on. Most people don't notice what's happened. They don't realize that it's a catastrophe. In the coming to presence of the danger, there conceals itself, therefore, the possibility of a turning in which the oblivion belonging to the coming to presence of being will so turn itself that with this turning, the truth of the coming to presence of being will expressly turn homeward into whatever is. So this is what we're trying to see how this is going to happen, how the oblivion of being is going to turn inward, homeward into its authenticity, and re-manifest itself in a new way that will surmount enframing. Yet probably this turning, the turning of the oblivion of being into the safe-keeping belonging to the coming to presence of being. Safekeeping because man builds a house for being. Works of art are avatars of being. Man is the shepherd of being. These are all metaphors that Heidegger uses to show that we build houses for being and we safeguard being in an authentic sense by creating worlds that world. The world worlds, that is to say, produces authentic realms of meaning and significance through myth, ritual, religion, philosophy, the arts, all these wonderful things that have now been wiped clean by technology. It's just wiped them out. And so now we're living in an age of what Heidegger calls, in another book that he wrote, just a few years before this, and keep in mind, this is right after World War II, so Heidegger is processing what he regards with World War II as a catastrophe. What he calls the age of devastation has now set in upon us, in which beings have been abandoned by being, and things are no longer thinging. That is, if you read the essay on the thing, you know what a thinging is. That is to say that a thing manifests itself authentically, presences itself as an authentic object, not in a scientific mode, not in a consumer mass reproduction mode, but as an authentic thing that gathers the fourfold, earth and sky, mortals and man, gathers them and glues together a world and makes it present and manifests it so that that world worlds, and the way a world worlds is through a thinging. But in the age of devastation now, in which what he says has happened is a desertification of being has spread forth upon the world with the rise of this worldless consumer society, things are no longer things. They appear in this worldless world as objects. They're merely objects shorn of significance, completely divested of any kind of meaning whatsoever. So that's what he's talking about here. That's the catastrophe that's happened. So yet probably this turning will finally come to pass only when the danger, which is in its concealed essence ever susceptible of turning, first comes expressly to light as the danger that it is. We have to first see this clearly, that this is a catastrophe, and it has to be clear to us in order that we can authentically create a new world that will world authentically. Perhaps we stand already in the shadow cast ahead by the advent of this turning. Heidegger, after all, for example, is privileged as a philosopher who has already seen this, that we have covered up being, that beings have been abandoned by beings, and that is the first step on the path to building a new authentic relation to being. When and how it will come to pass after the manner of a destiny, no one knows, nor is it necessary that we know. A knowledge of this kind would even be most ruinous for man, because his essence is to be the one who waits, the one who attends upon the coming presence of being, in that, in thinking, he guards it. So we can't rush being. We can't push it around the way we push nature around through enframing. We have to cultivate an authentic relationship to it. Only when man, as the shepherd of being, attends upon the truth of being, can he expect an arrival of a destining of being, a new epoch, and not sink to the level of mere wanting to know, mere grabbing, grasping ego. But what happens there, where the danger comes to pass as the danger, and is thus for the first time unconcealedly danger, and that we realize that it is a danger, a catastrophe? That we may hear the answer to this question, let us give heed to the beckoning sign that is preserved in some words of Haldeman, his favorite poet. At the beginning of the later version of the hymn Patmos, the poet says, "But where danger is, grows the saving power also." So in realizing that, and coming to consciousness that there is a danger that technology poses now, a danger in which it has substituted itself for the authentic relationship with being, the saving power lies in that once we realize that, we can then see through it and beyond it to a new relationship with being. Now it's important, I think, that he quotes from a poem called Patmos by Haldeman, because Patmos is the island upon which John the Evangelist wrote the book of Revelation, supposedly the John Gospel, but also the book of Revelation. And so that becomes significant here, that little clue connecting to the book of Revelation, because I think this essay is the closest that we get in Heidegger to a kind of eschatology in which he is announcing and seeing not the end of the world, but eventually with the turning about of being from oblivion to man's safekeeping of a new mode of being, in which a new epoch will come to pass and technology will come to an end. The epoch of technology as in framing will come to an end. He says we can't destroy technology. It's always going to be around. It's always going to be with us. We need it. We use it. But technology as a destining of enframing that robs the entire planet of authenticity and hijacks nature as mere objective quantities to be put on demand for use at a later time, that mode will come to pass. And I think here that there is a certain aspect in which we can see Heidegger here as, it's a kind of soteriology. It's very much analogous. We're in the age, according to Heidegger, in which the gods have withdrawn, and the God has not yet shown itself forth, the God that is to come. In the Der Spiegel interview, he says that only a God can save us. And so he's talking here about the manifestation of that God, not perhaps in a literal messianic sense, but we can draw, there's an implicit analogy here, I think, between the age of the Romans, the late Hellenistic period, when the authentic age of the pre-Socratics and the Greeks in their authentic mode had passed. The The gods had then withdrawn into concealment there, and the God had not yet come, and in that case the God was the Christ being who came down as the incarnation of the Logos. Logos was the understanding of being at that time. Logos was the word, and it was confined to a single being who became the avatar who came down as the Logos and ushered in a new age of being at that point. So he's implicitly drawing an analogy with that age. And so there is a kind of messianism hidden in here. And also, I think we should also think about that in the John Gospel itself, which was also written by John on Patmos, supposedly, that it's in that Gospel that Christ mentions the very same Gospel that describes him as incarnating the Word that comes down to earth. He mentions that he will send a paraclete. Paraclete means comforter, and he says, I will send amongst you, before the end comes, a paraclete. And paraclete will be ostensibly the one who will come to interpret and comfort the masses with a message. And so many philosophers, theologians, mystics who came after Christ presented and advertised themselves as this paraclete that was to come. Mani, for example, who created the Manichaean system, said that he was the incarnation of this paraclete, this being. And I think in many ways, Halderlin becomes for Heidegger a kind of John the Baptist figure pointing the way in the wilderness toward Heidegger's own philosophy, which I think becomes a kind of paraclete, a comforter who is coming to announce the possibility of a salvation in which we develop a new relationship to being that will move us beyond this epoch of enframing, this impoverishment of being as a desertification. But so the saving power lies in the danger, in the very danger itself, once we realize that it is a danger. So if now we think these words still more essentially than the poet sang them, if we follow them in thought as far as they go, they say, where the danger is as the danger, there the saving power is already thriving also. So the latter does not appear incidentally. The saving power is not secondary to the danger. The self-same danger is, when it is as the danger, the saving power. The danger is the saving power, inasmuch as it brings the saving power out of the danger's concealed essence that is ever susceptible of turning. What does to save mean? It means to loose, to anticipate, to free, to spare and husband, to harbor protectingly, to take under one's care, to keep safe. Lessing still uses the word saving emphatically in the sense of vindication, i.e. to put something back into what is proper and right, into the essential, and to keep it safe therein. That which genuinely saves is that which keeps safe, safekeeping. Now, safekeeping is what man does in his proper relationship with being. He safekeeps it through manifesting it authentically in the building of a world, an authentic world of meaning and significance. But where is the danger? What is the place for it? Inasmuch as the danger is being itself, it is nowhere and everywhere. It has no place as something other than itself. It is itself the placeless dwelling place of all presencing. The danger is the epoch of being coming to presence as enframing. Again, an impoverished age, that's the danger. When the danger is as the danger, that is when we realize what's going on, then its coming to presence expressly comes to pass, but the danger is the entrapping, that is the way in which being itself, in the mode of enframing, pursues with oblivion the safekeeping belonging to being, covers up being, and it falls into oblivion. In the entrapping, what comes to presence is this, that being dismisses and puts away its truth into oblivion in such a way that being denies its own coming to presence. Because science as enframing pushes all other modes of aletheia, of truth as unconcealment, aside, and insists that it's the only valid, authentic mode of truth. Everything has to be objective, and if it isn't objective and quantitatively measurable, then it isn't true. And so all the other ideas, metaphysical ideas, religious ideas, God, soul, freedom, immortality, what Kant called the ideas of the reason, are simply swept aside and regarded as so much unnecessary baggage because science is the one that determines the truth for us. Oh, really? The presumption of science here, it's unbelievable. When, accordingly, the danger is as the danger, then the entrapping, that is the way being itself entraps its truth with oblivion, comes expressly to pass. When this entrapping with oblivion does come expressly to pass, then oblivion as such turns in and abides. Thus rescued through this abiding from falling away out of remembrance, it is no longer oblivion. So this is the process whereby, with this turning that's coming, and that's in process right now, being will turn out of oblivion into aletheia, as a valid aletheia, a mode of unconcealing that will then reveal itself. With such inturning, The oblivion relating to being's safekeeping is no longer the oblivion of being, but rather turning in thus, it turns about into the safekeeping of being, which is the completely opposite mode. When the danger is, as the danger, with the turning about of oblivion, the safekeeping of being comes to pass and world comes to pass.